All right, it is about time for us to get started this morning. Song of Solomon, chapter 3, where we'll be at. Song of Solomon, chapter 3. Before we begin that, let's go to God in prayer. Our God and Father in heaven, we are ever thankful for all that you have given us, and especially, Father, as we have this day and this time now that we can come and study your word and offer worship and praise to you. We pray as we do so, we do those things that are in accordance with your will and pleasing to you, that you give us time and space to correct if we are not. And Father, we pray for our country and our leaders. We pray for our first responders and our military. We pray for those that are ill, for those caring for them. And Father, we most especially pray for the church and us as Christians, that we might stand and show your glory to the world, that more men may have the opportunity to come into your kingdom. And we ask all these things in your Son's name. Amen. We've been looking at the Shulamite and thinking about how this progresses through the courtship, and we're really not even to the wedding yet. That it's not always clear to tell when you're reading the writings, but most feel that chapter 3 is the final night of, shall we say, the courtship, and at chapter 4 goes into the actual wedding night. We've seen so far the Shulamite having concerns during the courtship about who she is and what she means to the bridegroom, to Solomon. We've seen him answer those concerns. We're going to see here she has basically a dream, a troubled night. In verses 1 through 5, let's look at chapter 3, 1 through 5. The Shulamite here, speaking most likely in her mind because she is having a dream. It says, "By night on my bed I sought the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. I will arise now, I said, and go about the city, in the streets and in the squares. I will seek the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. The watchmen who go about the city found me. I said, have you seen the one I love? Scarcely had I passed by them when I found the one I love. I held him and would not let him go until I had brought him to the house of my mother and into the chamber of her who conceived me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the does of the field, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases." What do we see? What's the overall thought of the Shulamite here again? She is trying to encourage, if we take just that last thought, the daughters of Jerusalem, the other women. What is one of the largest problems we have today? What do you think? Premarital sex, sex outside of marriage, all those. This is what she is talking about. Don't awaken that love until it pleases, until it's truly ready. And when is it ready? Yeah, once you're married, not before, not to someone else, but only at that point. Look at it as you go back. You can tell it's basically a dream as it opens there in verse 1. By night, her longings have gone on. Now, this is not wrong. You miss the one you're going to marry is what she's pointing forth to. She longs to be with him. It's not time to be with him yet, but she longs for that. If you truly love someone, what is one of the things that is indicative of that? I saw a little meme when I was looking up and studying some things for this, and it had the old man sitting there going, I didn't marry you because I wanted to live my life with you. And somebody says, oh, that shouldn't be the attitude a man should have. No, he gave the proper attitude. I married you because I couldn't live my life without you. This is where the Shulamite is at the moment. She is sitting there going, I love him so much. I want him with me. Do we really think that she literally got out of bed and started wandering around the city that night? No, this again appears to be a dream. I started going around. I want to be with him so much. I start what? Looking for him, right? You know, it's a little different today with the cell phones and some of that. But what did you used to do if your spouse wasn't where you thought when you thought they should be there? You ever had that moment, huh? Yeah, you got worried, and if it got long enough, you got up and went looking for them. You were concerned. This is where she's at. She is longing for him so much she wants him there. And she goes, in this case, in the dream, out looking about the city at night. Why would she ask the guards? Is one question a commentator put forth. Why would she ask the guards? If this were literal, if she were really out on the street late at night, and our equivalent today, the police officers are out there keeping the streets safe at night, she sees some of them and she asks, where is my beloved? What would be the difference based on who and where she would be at this point? Who is her beloved? The king. She's most likely already in the palace. When you start talking, she's not having to wander around the whole city looking for it. And so she is looking for her beloved. She asks the guards. One commentator goes, why would you ask the guards? Those he's working at night usually, or is he gone from her presence, staying in an unknown place? They're not married yet. This is a dream. She's ready to be married to him and wants to be with him. In the dream, what do? You go around looking. She asks everyone. And while she is asking, who does she find down in verse 4? I've just passed by the guards, and then I find the one I love. In the dream, he's come to her. And so you see this idea. You see the idea of what her love is. What is it she does here? You notice it's, I held him and would not let him go until I had brought him. Now think about this. What does it mean she brought him to the house of her mother, into her mother's chamber? There you go. It seems to be a little bit of both. She wants to be with him, but she also wants what? Mother's approval. What's one of the hardest points when you're thinking about marriage? When do you bring someone home to meet mom and dad? That becomes a question, doesn't it? What is that usually a sign of? Do you bring every person you ever dated home to meet your mom and dad? You know, and this is what you see, looking for that approval. I think Dad had it best when Neely and I got engaged. Right after we got engaged, I got sent to Atlanta, Georgia on a Tuesday morning because I was a day late for training already, they said, and I didn't understand that from the company. They had bought the ticket. They had gotten me the hotel. They said, you're on the plane. My dad's retirement was supposed to be that Thursday. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. He had the great day because he got Neely to himself to introduce as the one who was going to be his daughter-in-law. He thought he was in. Why? Because he approved of her. This is what the Shulamite is looking for. Mom, do you like him? That's an important thing. If your mama hates the one you're going to marry, what is it going to make things like? Sharon says, bad. That's a simple answer for it. But yeah, it's not going to be, what's Thanksgiving going to be like if you don't like the in-laws or the in-laws don't like you? Short and stressful. What's Christmas going to be like? You just named the holidays. You see that picture there. You want that approval is what she's looking for. And again, at verse 5, that same charge, it came up in chapter 2. It's going to come up again in chapter 8. Again, not so much that she's at night, but you see the charge and a remembrance of the charge. Make sure you're what going into your wedding night? Sure, and a word that rhymes with it, pure. Sure and pure. That's the picture. Now, here is something, taking this as the thing. We warn the women all the time, make sure you're sure and pure, make sure you're sure and pure. And yet when boys go and do it, what do we often hear the excuse? Yeah, they're out sowing their wild oats. Boys, keep them wild oats to yourself until you're married. You need to be just as sure and just as pure as she is. Why we seem to have this double standard, and the only problem with this double standard, what does it take for him to sow his wild oats? We don't want any of the girls out there messing around, but it's okay for the boy. But in order for him to do it, what has to happen? One of the girls has got to be out there somewhere. We see how it applies. And how do we hold her versus him? But that's what the Shulamite is looking at. That's what she's encouraging those, at least in her dream, those daughters of Jerusalem. And I have a feeling when she had the opportunity to talk to her friends and that subject came up, they encouraged each other. Stay sure and pure from the description we have here. At verse 6, we have Solomon coming in. And it's a picture related, at least from 6 through 8, of the Shulamite seeing him come. Look at 6 through 8, where it says, "Who is this coming out of the wilderness, like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the merchants' fragrant powders? Behold, it is Solomon's couch, with 60 valiant men around it, of the valiant of Israel. They all hold swords, being expert in war. Every man has his sword on his thigh because of fear in the night." Here is Solomon coming in, and the indication is he's coming on a chair that is carried by other men. That's the picture. It seems to be a kingly parade into the wedding. Here is the groom coming. He's the king of Israel, showing his power, his leadership, his safety and security. Think about that even today. If a president of the United States goes wandering around, how many people are with him? At least. I mean, even just if he's walking in what is a safe area, there's at least 3 people usually on his immediate. And you're not talking about the people who are hiding on the roofs and the people who are waiting at the helicopter and the people who are in the car and the people. It's not a small event for a great leader. And you see it with Solomon here. It's described as having 60 valiant men. I don't know how many were actually carrying the chair and how many are guards. And yes, if this is the parade into the wedding feast, then you add extra to it. That's the reason you have so many. Because, for example, if the president were coming, say, to a military base, what are the automatic things that are going to happen for his plane to land? Well, we think about, the traffic controllers and all that. When that plane pulls up to a stop, how many people are going to be standing there waiting on him? And why? We used to have a rule, it was going to be about 250. Because if for some reason he were to land at what we called the Expeditionary Airfield, there was going to be a full company of Marines waiting on him at the base of the stairs because he was going to receive the honor guards that he was what? Due as we see it, because he's who? Who is this groom that is coming to the Shulamite? It's not some I guess the way we'd say it, some Joe Schmo who's just marrying some woman in town. This is the king of Israel. When he comes, are you going to know he's there? That's the picture we see here. All of his escorts, all holding the swords, and the swords on their thigh, and because of fear in the night. So what would the fear in the night be? Why would he be showing this to her? What was one of her concerns? How am I going to be taken care of? And yet here comes the groom, and he's not by himself. He's bringing 60 men with their swords on their thighs. How safe should she feel now? Very safe. He's trying to encourage her that safe feeling when she's with him. What ought a wife to feel when her husband is there? Safe. That's the picture that we get. Picks up at verses 9 through 11 to close out the chapter. We see the rest of it. This chair, let's read it. Of the wood of Lebanon, Solomon the king made himself a palanquin. He made its pillars of silver, its support of gold, its seat of purple, its interior paved with love by the daughters of Jerusalem. Go forth, our daughters of Zion, and see King Solomon with the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, the day of the gladness of his heart. We get a description of that chair. What kind of wood was used to build the chair the king sat on? It refers to it of the wood of Lebanon. Where were the best trees at that day and age? If you remember, they're down in Jerusalem. What's one thing that's not really, even today, you look at the pictures of Israel, what doesn't really exist in Jerusalem? A lot of trees, and especially not trees of what? Yeah, hardwood or size. When Solomon is going to go build the temple later on, he talks to King Hiram up in Tyre. Why? He needs wood. Where did the big cedar trees grow? In Lebanon. And during that time, he would have the trees cut in Lebanon, taken out to the sea coast, brought down on the sea because wood floats, and then brought inland to Jerusalem because it was easier than trying to travel it all overland. But here he is. He's going to have a chair that men carry him on, and it's made out of the best wood available, the trees of Lebanon, those cedar trees, most likely cedar, put together in this case. You notice the descriptions of how else it's done. It's pillars of silver, so even those pieces that it stands on, either solid silver or covered in silver, and the supports of gold, and the seat of purple. Why is it that purple and blue were often the colors of royalty? The hardest to get. We think about it as nothing today. How many purple shirts could we go to Walmart and buy this afternoon? As many as we wanted, relatively cheaply. How did you dye something purple in Solomon's day? You sent someone out, because most of the time this was obtained from a sea creature. So you had to send someone out into the sea. They had to find the right creature, the right coral, sponge, whatever it was, harvest it, and it took a lot of it to make a little bit of dye. And so you can see how much would purple be worth. You think about that when we get into the New Testament. Why was Lydia called a businesswoman who knew what she was doing? What was her trade? She was a seller of purple. This is that mark of, you didn't have purple if you weren't what? Wealthy. You had to have wealth or power behind you. Here is the picture. You think about it. How many of you would like a chair, and some men to carry it, by the way? That way you don't have to walk around. but a chair that was made of the best wood available, covered in silver and gold with a purple cushion on it. Would that not represent, especially at that time, the power and the wealth? And so you see him doing that. Solomon's penchant for women may be referenced there in verse 11. We don't know which number the Shulamite is in terms of the wives of Solomon. Was she number 1? Was she number 700? We know he had 700 wives and concubines in the end, but you notice a peculiarity to this wedding. This is his wedding. It seems to be maybe not his first, because Song of Solomon, when we get over into chapter 6, is going to tell us there are already 60 queens and 80 concubines. So it's not his first, but it seems to be the one that is the most important. Think about, in the smaller scale, you had Jacob. What was the problem that Jacob's wives had? Jealousy. Why? What did Leah know from the time her father said, "You're going into his tent tonight," was going to happen? He didn't, to use the word, he didn't love her. Who was it that Jacob worked 7 years for? For Rachel. And then Rachel's father sent Leah in that night. Then the next day he has the audacity to say, well, we can't marry the younger before we marry the older. But if you're willing to work 7 more years for Rachel, I'll give you to her to you also. Can you imagine, really, who did Jacob work 14 years for? See, Jacob didn't work 7 years for Rachel. Jacob worked how long? He worked that first 7 years. I'm going to marry Rachel. He finds out it was Leah, and his father-in-law has the audacity to say, I know you did, but that was for Leah. Now, if you'll work 7 more years, you can have Rachel also. He really worked 14 years for that woman. What did that tell Leah already? Do you think Leah knew that Jacob had worked those 7 years for Rachel? Yes. Do you think she knew the conversation he had with her father that if you'll work 7 more years, you can have Rachel also? Do you think in Leah's mind, from the day she married Jacob, she already knew she was what? At least second place, or I should say at best second place. Because how many years do you think Jacob would have worked for her? He didn't work any for her. Everything he worked was for Rachel. That seems to be where Solomon's at here. And we don't have a lot of information, but just based on what we do have, here is Solomon with that one true love. Now, why did Solomon end up with 700 wives and 300 concubines, and even if at this point, 60 queens and 80 concubines? What were most of Solomon's marriages and concubines about? Yeah, making a treaty or an agreement or some business deal with another country. And in fact, why is it that, even though we think they're English, why is it that the person sitting on the throne as the King of England is actually a descendant of Germans? Marriage. Britain and Germany are at war at some point, and they decide we want to make peace. What is used to ratify that peace treaty way, way back? We'll give our children to each other in marriage. And then I would never attack the country where my daughter is now living, now would I? And the other one, I would never want to attack the country that is, got my son. We're not going to do this. We're going to, and so they would use that. Solomon's trying to solidify Israel's place in the world. And even though you think about this, should have told the Shulamite, and I think we see her with it here a little bit, something to be aware of. Solomon was going to have a lot of what? A lot of other women. And that was something I think you see, but you notice hers. Go forth, O daughters of Zion, and sing King Solomon with the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding. He came to me in the what? The full regalia. He's showing his love for me. And that seems to be where it goes. We get into chapter 4, and we'll do this. Chapter 4 seems to be the actual wedding night. We're going to have some words of praise between Solomon and the beloved Shulamite. It opens with Solomon. Solomon's actually speaking most of the chapter, 1 through 15. Notice how he starts. Let's just read verses 1 through 5 to start with. Behold, you are fair, my love. Behold, you are fair. You have dove's eyes behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats going down from Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn sheep, which have come up from the washing, every one of which bears twins, and none is barren among them. Your lips are like a strand of scarlet. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like a piece of pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built for an armory, on which hang 1,000 bucklers, all shields of mighty men. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of gazelle, which feed among the lilies. What does Solomon come in saying? What is he trying to stress to her? What was you go all the way back to chapter 1 when we see this courtship start. What was her major concern at that time? If he's going to like her, why? Well, the other women, and comparatively, she was, as she says, I am dark but lovely. O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon, do not look upon me because I am dark, because the sun has tanned me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard have I not kept. Her biggest concern at that point was, I'm basically, for lack of a better term, I'm a tomboy. She's been outside, whatever color her skin was. At that time, unlike today, tanning is a mark of quote, quote, beauty, isn't it? There are women who go out and they pay money to have somebody put them in a tanning bed and make sure their skin gets darker. She's, at this time, what was the mark of a woman who didn't have to do any work? What was the mark of the woman who was just taken care of? They were fair-skinned. They weren't outside. She says, my skin's been darkened by the sun. My brothers were angry and made me work in the vineyard. What were her hands going to be like? Anybody ever actually worked in the vineyard? You know, we see that picture of the women stomping on grapes and so forth in Italy, and we think, oh, that's not all that hard. What would their hands and feet be like if they were picking grapes and stomping out the grape juice all day long? Yeah, the hands would be dry and splitting because you've been along those vines all day. What would your feet be like? Can you imagine the coloration and that your feet would have after stomping grapes all day, unless you got lucky and only got the white grapes? Yeah. This is where the Shulamite is at. What's the first thing that Solomon says to her? Behold, you are fair. Behold, you are fair. What is he saying? It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about you. What is the one concern that ought to be there? Now, ladies, I know y'all get worried about what others see with you and everything else. But here, and if we go back to Elkanah with Hannah and a number of other cases, Jacob with Rachel and some of the others, what ought to be the one concern on your mind? Does it matter what's the beauty magazine that's out there? Cosmopolitan. Does it matter what Cosmopolitan says about your clothing? Does it matter what Cosmopolitan says about what makeup you use, how much makeup you use, what kind of earrings you have, this, that, the other? Or is there only one and only one case that matters? What's the only thing that matters is you are pleasing to who? Now, men, we ignore this. What's the only thing that matters for us? We're pleasing to who? Our spouse. That's the whole picture here. Solomon is his first words, behold, you are fair, my love. Behold, you are fair. Don't worry about what anybody else says, because to me, you're what? Does it matter if any other man finds you attractive? And I know that's a hard question. Does it matter if any other man finds you attractive? Actually, ladies, your greatest goal would be for no other man to find you attractive. That removes one of the biggest problems marriages have, called fornication and attraction to another partner, doesn't it? That is what Solomon is beginning with. And here are some great lines to use. We had the earlier one about the being like a horse, but here are some good lines to use Solomon gives you. You have dove's eyes behind your veil. What do you think that really means? What is Solomon saying? That's not a line I would try today. Ladies, what would you do if he just looked up at you and said, you have dove's eyes behind your veil? But what does a dove's eyes look like? And what do you see in them? The dove is a sign of peace. And you see it in their eyes, really. They're not a bird that goes out and what? Unless you have a piece of bread in your hand. And there's a whole bunch of them, you're pretty safe. They go out and they are seen as peaceful creatures. That's what he's saying. Your hair is like, and I don't think I'd want to try this one, your hair is like a flock of goats. I just don't want to think about what would happen to myself or any of the other men in here if we looked at our spouses and said, your hair is like a flock of goats. I got a feeling we might get hurt. But what did it really mean then? What is goat's hair like if it's taken care of? Fluffy and actually some really soft hair. This is the picture he's trying to give. Your hair's like that flock of goats going down from Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep, shorn sheep, which have come up from the washing. What was he saying about her teeth? They were white and healthy. Do you think that was always easy back then? Today, what do we have to make our teeth white? Fluoride and chemicals. And hey, if your teeth aren't white enough, you can go buy the whitening strips. And if that doesn't work, you can go to the dentist, and he has even more powerful stuff to make your teeth white. What they have at the time Solomon was there? Sticks. Probably about right. Not what we have now. And there were don't run down to the corner to the little store and buy whitening strips. They didn't exist. But her teeth, he says, are like white, like those of a sheep. Think about a sheep for a moment. When they bring it in to be shorn, many times the sheep doesn't look quite white, because where has the sheep been? Yeah, out in the pastures, and maybe not like the pig rolling around in the mud, but you're still going to pick up some dirt. Well, they would shear the sheep off and then send the sheep down, and the sheep would be scrubbed clean. What did the sheep look like at that moment? That's the picture he gives of her teeth, trying to give her a compliment. I don't think it's one we want to use today, but it worked for Solomon. But does it hurt to give your wife a compliment, gentlemen? Whatever it is. You know, she has a lovely sweater on. Does it hurt to say that? What's one thing women like to hear? And you notice how I asked that question. What do women want sometimes? You know, there are two things that'll let a woman know you love her. What are they? Huh? Can I clean the dishes? And unlike some, and Leland was a great proponent of it. I mean, he could say it and you understood what he was saying. He often would say, I told you I loved you when I married you, and if it changes, I'll let you know. Because sometimes us men don't do what? We don't say a lot. What does it take? A woman wants help her and tell her. It never hurts to give her a compliment and tell her something looks good. Dinner was great. If you liked what you ate for dinner, is it wrong to compliment her who cooked it? In most cases. Sometimes us men cook dinner, but does it hurt to tell her that? Hey, Isaac, does it hurt? You don't have a woman in this line at the moment, but does it hurt to tell your mom that what she fixed you for dinner or lunch or anything else was good? No. In fact, if you're willing to do it for your mom, what is it going to say about you later on? You're going to more or less be willing to tell her later on. By the way, the one thing you don't want to say to a woman is, it's not like my mama made. Don't do that. That is the best I've ever had. That's the only thing you ever need to say. Because the moment you say the other, what does it do? Yeah. You create it. So don't create those kind of problems. Notice he goes on. I'm not sure about this next phrase. Every one of which bears twins. How many children do you want to have? I don't know how many children anybody wants to have, but I'm having a feeling that using that line on a woman today would not be a good start. Every time you bear, we're going to have twins. Yeah, Sharon says, oh no. He's talking about the sheep, and yes, how that relates to the teeth, which is an important part. And so the teeth, what is he saying in the end about her teeth? She's got a mouthful of them, and they're white and healthy. You think about that. Anybody remember, most of us in here, when you were much, much younger? Rebecca can relate to it because she's got one that just never came in. What happens when there is a missing tooth and you're trying to eat something sometimes? And you can go ahead and say it, I know. It's a struggle. Evidently, the Shulamite did not have that struggle, is what's being said. Every tooth, every sheep bearing twins, there was a matching what? In fact, what's the worst case you could ever have? You know, remember when you started losing those baby teeth? What did you never want to lose at the same time? The same one on top that matches its bottom, because when you had that, what did you really have? Yeah, big old hole. Hard to eat anything at all then. And so we see that picture. As it goes on, and none is barren among them. Well, those teeth are healthy. Look at verse 3 now. Your lips are like a strand of scarlet. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like a piece of pomegranate. She's wearing something that would hide and imply the wedding is there. When he lifts it, what does he find, in other words? You ever thought about that? Why do you wear the veil in a wedding? Ladies, why do you think you wear a veil in the weddings? Because that's what Mama wore. It's supposed to keep her hidden. She comes in. Who's the first one that's supposed to see the bride when she makes the entrance? You ever thought about that? Why do they stand the groom at the very front, and he's basically centered looking straight down whatever aisle she's coming in? Because he's supposed to get that first sight. And as she comes down that aisle wearing that veil, most everybody cannot see her face. And even when her father hands her off, the veil isn't lifted. What's the first thing that the groom does? He gets to lift the veil. Who's the first one seeing her? What does it sound like Solomon says? When I saw you, I what? Did she need a lot of makeup? Evidently not. But he saw her, and what's he want to do? We sometimes snicker at things like this. He wants to kiss her. You ever had that moment when the only thing you want to do is be able to kiss that one who is your love? You ever seen those when men get deployed in the military and they come home and their wives are there to meet them at the plane and they finally get dismissed? What's the first thing the woman does? It's usually in two parts. Number one, where do the arms go? Around him, right? What was it she did in the previous chapter? I want him with me. And when she got him, what did she do? She wrapped him up. What's the next thing that usually happens? A kiss. That's what Solomon is referring to here. We shouldn't be scared of it, but we need to put it where it what? Belongs. That's the key we see throughout the book. And you think about the mouth being lovely and the temples are being like a piece of pomegranate. Now, here's another, I don't think I would try to use on your wives today, but your neck is like the Tower of David, built for an armory on which hang 1,000 bucklers, all shields of mighty men. Just doesn't sound like one that, but if you think about what Solomon is saying, what does she look like when she's standing there? This is really an overall look at her, even though he concentrates on the neck. For the neck to stand up like a tower and be what's described by Solomon as something on which you could hang shields, what's the rest of her going to have to be like? Is she standing up there going, I wish Solomon had hurried. I don't know if he were here. Or is she standing up? Which way and how do you see that person? And what would you think of someone who was standing over in the corner and just like that versus someone who is standing straight up to look at you? Which one's going to give you more confidence in that person? That's what Solomon sees. He's not saying her neck is built out of stone and she's just all muscle, and he's not saying that. She has that posture that makes her stand up. And by doing that, it makes her what? Stand out. A result of having female children. Anybody here ever watched The Princess Diaries? In the beginning of that movie, they find a girl who is basically about as tomboyish as you can get. Doesn't care what her hair looks like, doesn't care what her clothes are, doesn't walk upright, doesn't do any of that. By the end of the movie, they bring in people that teach her to do what? Because if you're going to be a princess, what do you have to do? You have to look the part. You got to stand up straight. You often see it. What do they make the one who wants to be a princess do? They put the book on her head and make her walk around. Why? Teach her how to walk straight, how to hold that posture up, how to look regal. What is Solomon saying about this Shulamite woman? And what does it say about herself when she's willing to do that? She is proud of who she is, and he sees it. That's what he sees there. Verse 5, the breasts are delicate, pure, and beautiful as young fawns. They haven't been defiled by another man. They haven't been misused. You see this go on into verse 6. Okay, so he starts at verse 5. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle, which feed among the lilies, until the day breaks and the shadows flee away. I will go my way to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. Is it wrong to be attracted to the one who is your spouse? This is what Solomon's saying. Now, we look at it and say, oh, I can't believe the preacher just talked about a woman's breast. Guess what? Every woman has them. It's something that the man is supposed to be attracted to. God made us this way. Why do we get scared of it? Now, does that mean we ought to be doing some other thing? No. But why are we scared of some of these things? And so he is attracted to her. He wants to be with her, and he's going to go on his way and enjoying her beauty. Now, who's the one who's enjoying this beauty, though? This becomes the question. Ladies, who's supposed to enjoy that beauty? Your husband and only your husband. That's the picture that's given. And that's what we see Solomon doing. We're at the end of our time, so we'll pick up at verse 7 next week here in chapter 4. Any other thoughts or comments, though, before we close? If not, that's it for today.